Hi, good morning and welcome to the Delta Stewardship Council meeting. It is 9:30 on Thursday, August 28th, 2025. We're here at the California Natural Resources Agency building in Sacramento, California. My name is Julie Lee and I am chair of the Delta Stewardship Council. Emma, can you explain how the public can participate in this meeting, please?
If any member of the public is interested in providing public comment on any agenda item during today's meeting, please send an email blue card to engage@deltacouncil.ca.gov as seen on the screen. Be sure to note your name and the agenda item you wish to speak on. When called, the clerk will unmute you.
Thank you. And in accordance with our Bagley-Keene requirements, we will conduct a roll call of the council members to establish a quorum. Emma, can you lead us in a roll call?
Yes, I want to note that Councilmember Burgess and Vice Chair Miller are absent. Vice Chair Miller is expected to join us and we'll make an announcement when she does. Councilmember Damrell. Councilmember Weso.
Present.
Councilmember Moranian.
Here.
Councilmember Zingali.
Here.
Chair Lee.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Our next agenda item is public comment. This item is for the public to comment on any topic not on the council's agenda. Any comments on items on the agenda need to be taken during that item. Emma, do we have any public comments for items not on today's agenda?
Not in Sacramento. Councilmember Zingali and Weso.
None in Eureka. And Councilmember Weso in San Antonio, Texas.
Okay. No public comment.
Thank you. Our next agenda item is the consent calendar. We have one item on the consent calendar, which is our adoption of the July 24th, 2025 meeting summary. Before we vote, I'll ask if there's any public comments on items on the consent calendar.
No public comment in Sacramento.
None in Eureka.
Councilmember Weso.
None here in San Antonio.
Sounds good. All right. No public comment, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right. If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve this item.
Approval?
Maria moves for approval. Did you say second, Judge?
Yes.
To Judge seconds? All right. Emma, can you lead us in a vote?
Councilmember Damrell. Damrell, aye. Councilmember Weso.
Aye.
Weso, aye. Councilmember Moranian.
Aye.
Moranian, aye. Councilmember Zingali.
Aye.
Zingali, aye. Chair Lee.
Aye.
Chair Lee, aye. The motion passes.
Thank you. Our next agenda item is the chair's report. I went to the National Heritage Area Advisory Committee meeting on August 20th. We heard an interesting presentation on the origins of Benicia and its shipbuilding past. And we got an update on federal funding, the passport program, and some marketing efforts that are taking place this year. The project is eligible for Tier 2 funding from the feds in 2026. So the marketing and some of the other efforts will kind of take off in earnest next year. But this year they're doing a lot of work in preparation, including working on the 250th anniversary of the U.S. and the 106th, yes, and the California centennial, whatever that is too. So we should be seeing more visible efforts coming from the NHA next year. And that's probably it for me. Do any other council members have any updates they want to throw out? Nope. Okay. Do we have any public comment on this item, Emma?
No public comment in Sacramento.
None in Eureka. None in San Antonio.
No public comment.
Right. And next I'll turn it over to our executive officer, Jessica Pearson, for the executive officer's report.
Thank you. Good morning. I'd like to kick off my report with a few announcements. First, an update on the ongoing development of the Bay Delta Plan, also known as the Water Quality Control Plan for the Delta. The revised draft was released by staff from the Water Board on July 24th. And for the first time in the process, the draft does incorporate the Healthy Rivers and Landscapes Voluntary Agreement approach alongside a proposed regulatory approach. State Water Resources Control Board originally planned to receive public comments and letters through September 10th, with originally planned 2 public hearings on September 8th and 9th, but that timeline was recently pushed out to accommodate more public comment. So the board will now receive comments in writing through September 29th or through the oral comment at hearings that have been rescheduled to take place on September 24th and September 25th. The council launched a survey on August 21st to help inform our update to our public participation plan. Public participation is fundamental to the council's mission and work. Our goal here is to create an open, welcoming, and easy engagement process. So feedback we hope to get through this survey will help us better understand the needs of the public and improve our community engagement practices. The survey is open through October 2nd. The link to take the survey was sent out through our council email list, but can also be found on our website homepage. So I encourage everyone to participate. And finally, I'm pleased to announce that proposed regulations relating to the council's meeting procedures have been approved by the Office of Administrative Law, and that will take effect October 1st. There has been a lot of activity out of the governor's office in support of 3 of his key water priorities for the state, aside from the revised draft of the Bay Delta Plan, which incorporates the voluntary agreements negotiated with water users. There's also been a number of announcements related to the Delta Conveyance project, which we'll hear more about later on our agenda, as well as an announcement that the California Water Commission voted to dedicate additional Prop 1 funding to the proposed Sites Reservoir project in Northern California. We have no new covered actions that have been filed since our last meeting. And for continued notifications of these filings, I invite people to please sign up for our listserv. To find information on previous covered actions, you can visit our website under Delta Plan/covered actions. And of course, in our monthly board packet, we produce a full list of Delta activities that we are tracking, and this is called our active projects list. That's also findable on our website and updated monthly. I do have 2 personnel announcements for you this month. Please join me in welcoming our new IT manager, Glenn Bosden. Glenn brings over 30 years of rich experience in IT. He comes to us from Microsoft, where as a systems engineer and senior technical support manager, he provided support and strategic planning for state departments, including assisting with technical implementations and compliance with California Department of Technology policies. He's well-versed in project management, risk analysis, and implementation of security tools and protocols, so we're lucky to have him. Let's also welcome Brooke Eastman, who joins us as a senior environmental scientist in the Science Communication and Synthesis Unit. Brooke has a PhD in biology and forest ecology from West Virginia University, for which she evaluated the long-term effects of acid deposition on forest biodiversity and carbon cycling. Brooke was most recently an environmental justice coordinator at the U.S. Department of the Interior, and she was based in Southern California. So welcome to Brooke. We have a few outreach highlights that I want to note this month. Our 2025 Delta Research Awards content earned top attention across all of the council's social media platforms. That included quotes from and photos of Chair Julie Lee and Delta lead scientist Dr. Lisa Marie Wyndham-Myers. We had some great graphics and some broad overviews of the topics that are being covered in those selected projects. On a related note, the links in our Research Awards news release email announcement earned the most clicks this month, with well over 100 subscribers clicking to learn more. And our LinkedIn follower count continues to grow, so we're really leaning into putting more content on LinkedIn. Next, I'd like to invite Audrey Cho, our Executive Fellow, up for our legislative update. Welcome, Audrey.
Good morning, Chair and members. Beginning as usual, members came back from summer recess on August 18th, and Senate Bill 650 was amended that day. The amendment alters Section 85202 of the Water Code to include the following. It is the intent of the legislature that the council appointees have knowledge about the Delta. Today, the bill will be read a third time on the Assembly floor. Then we'll hopefully move to concurrence in the Senate and to bill enrollment. As for the rest of the legislative process, year one of a 2-year legislative session is quickly coming to a close, and the last day of session is September 12th. Also, many bills are currently being held in the suspense file, and tomorrow is suspense day, where bills with a fiscal impact will either pass through or not. In recent legislative events on August 22nd, we hosted a virtual briefing on the Delta Independent Science Board for legislative staff held by Dr. Lisa Wanger. Dr. Wanger oriented staff to the Delta, the value of the Independent Science Board, key ISB products, and upcoming events like the Emerging Climate Science Symposium from September 16th through 17th. And we hosted staff from various Assembly and Senate offices, as well as committees. I'd also like to give a quick update on a bill in the current legislative session. AB 764, Birds and Mammals Mute Swans, is authored by Republican Assemblymember Jeff Gonzalez, who represents Imperial, Riverside, and San Bernardino counties. This bill would allow the take of mute swans as non-game birds by landowners or licensed hunters through 2031. Here, take means to hunt, pursue, capture, or kill. Under current law, it's unlawful to take any bird or mammal except a non-game mammal. Mute swans are invasive and known to consume massive amounts of aquatic vegetation in wetland habitats like the Sassoon Marsh, and can act aggressively towards other wildlife and native waterfowl dependent on the Pacific Flyway. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife estimates that the population of mute swans has grown substantially over the last 20 years. And currently, the Department of Fish and Wildlife requests that wild mute swan sightings be reported to them. This bill is sponsored by the California Waterfowl Association and supported by the Sassoon Resource Conservation District. We've also been speaking a lot recently about abandoned and derelict vessels. Beginning in mid-July, the United States Coast Guard recently concluded their demolition effort of a 152-foot decommissioned patrol vessel that was leaking oil into Stockton drinking water and irrigation water supply. Dive crews had to cut the vessel into pieces that were then lifted onto a barge for disposal. The vessel is the last of 3 boats that sank in Little Potato Slough near Stockton, all of which have since been removed. And this effort was funded by the Federal Oil Spill Liability Trust Fund, administered by the Coast Guard's National Pollution Fund Center. Lieutenant Commander Mark Leahy, who was the incident commander for the operation, stated it best: "There are dozens more wrecks throughout the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. This one just happened to threaten water, wildlife, and people all at once." And with that, today will be my last legislative update to you and my last day at the council as an executive fellow. I have appreciated the opportunity to meet with you all and get to know you all through confirmation hearings, legislative meetings, and these updates, and am grateful to have been able to provide you with state and federal policy information. I've learned so much and really am super thankful to the council staff who have guided and mentored me, with a special shout out to Amanda Bull, Morgan Chow, and Brandon Chapin.
Yeah, I'd like to add that in 11 short months, Audrey's really become an integral part of our team here at the council. We're so grateful how she capably transitioned to cover the duties of legislative and policy advisor. She really has a professional maturity beyond her years and a natural ability to read the room. She can really understand the big picture quickly. She takes the initiative. These legislative briefings that she's talking about are ones that she set up and helped organize within the council to execute. She also, while she was here, contributed to some of our key policy documents like Delta Adapts and the Tribal Environmental Justice Issue Paper. And she's just never shied away from new challenges and hard work. So thank you so much for spending your fellowship year with us.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I agree. Thanks, Audrey. You've been great. You've really stepped into some big shoes. This job is no joke, and you've really just exceeded all of our expectations, well above and beyond what a regular executive fellow has to go through. And I really appreciated how you kept track of all of the federal changes happening out with those departments, and you sent some really good emails on that and a little report. So thank you for that.
Gail, you want to say something?
May I just add my just incredible admiration, Audrey, of everything that you've done, and I just think you exemplify really the
Oh.
fellowship program is in terms of this ability to like learn and grow from each other. And it's super impressive. I do want to share your shout out to Brandon. I think he just did a great job and really embraced every opportunity for you. So it's exactly what we should be doing and just gives me a lot of hope that things like this work. So congratulations. And I hope we get to see you serving California. I think it's super important that we keep people like you around.
Thank you so
Just,
much.
yeah, I wanted to add, what I watched you do, that you have the right mix of talent, expertise, and know-how to do this job. So it's been very good. We benefited from what you did, and I hope that this was a great experience for you. Hope that we can have the benefit of working with you soon.
Thank you all so much. Appreciate it.
Okay, well, just looking ahead at the rest of the agenda for today. Next, we're going to hear from our Delta lead scientist, Dr. Lisa Marie Wyndham-Myers. And then she is going to introduce Council Science Program staff who will provide a summary of the progress in implementing the Council's 2022 to 2026 Science Action Agenda. Afterwards, the Metropolitan Water District, along with Department of Fish and Wildlife and council staff, are going to present on the Webb Tract Wetland Restoration Project in the Central Delta. And then we will hear updates from Delta Watermaster Jay Ziegler and the Department of Water Resources Carrie Buckman with Delta Conveyance Project updates. And that concludes my executive officer's report, unless there's any questions.
Thanks. Any questions from the members? Nope. All right. Emma, do we have any public comment on this item?
None in Sacramento, Madam Chair.
None in Eureka.
None in San Antonio.
All right. Thank you. We're on agenda item 7, which is our lead scientist report. So I'll introduce Dr. Lisa Marie Wyndham-Myers.
Great. Thank you, Chair Lee. Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to talk about an unpleasant topic like invasive species when you have a nice strategic framework to think about how to get ahead of the curve and also how to pivot when conditions change. We'll hear later on Zoom today from 2 PIs that the Delta Science Program funded to improve our responses to invasive species. Here I'm going to highlight a recent paper from Abby Keller, who's now a PhD student at UC Berkeley, who's been focused on European green crab invasion, which is a nearly impossible problem here on the US Pacific coast. It's a voracious predator, devastates fisheries and native ecosystems, and like golden mussel, it has never been eradicated where it's invaded. So Abby and her colleagues set about to develop an understanding of what could be done and a better way to determine when resistance is futile. They came up with a quantitative way to use this RAD framework, which is called, it's a combination of resist, accept, direct. This is what the US Fish and Wildlife Service uses, what the National Park Service uses to help evaluate the choices that they have when rapid change is happening. So one option is obviously to resist the change at all cost. Another is to accept the change and then adapt to it. And the other is to direct the change with active ecosystem management. So that might be like introducing other animals and plants to alleviate the impact of the invasive species, for example. Next slide, please. So this paper is very math heavy, and the equations in this paper were then put into a graphical user interface. What we use the word Shiny app sometimes. We have some Shiny apps on our program's website, but what they are is an easy user interface to optimize the effort that would be needed to keep the population low, and also identify what population pressure, whether it's either growth of that organism from the inside or recruitment from outside the system, what level at which that invasion cannot be stopped with the methods that are being used. So this graphic just is here to show you that control efforts in the very first, if you follow through the sequence, you can keep new colonizations under control if you are effective and you don't have large source if you're effective with your first method of control, and then next you're not getting new recruits from the outside. But you can see in the sequential ones going down, the bottom 3, that even with those efforts, you can hit a situation where the populations that are nearby and or connected to your system mean that all of your efforts in one place just can't do the job, just can't get it done. And so this is one reason, for example, that the California Department of Fish and Wildlife focus right now is on containment of the golden mussel population, basically to keep those new recruits down so that control efforts can be effective. So this app also specifically asks questions like, what asks of the user of the app, what removal cost are you willing to bear for a given removal effort? And the focus of the effort is to figure out the transition from resisting to accepting change, because of course nobody wants to do nothing, but at some point keeping resisting may not get you where you need to go. And they also included in their a look to the future with an eye to non-stationarity, and that's a term we use a lot now, but just basically that conditions are changing, and so how we understand the way things work might be changing into the future. So for example, if waters are getting warmer, you can assume, particularly in green crab and also in golden mussel, that recruitment of individuals will increase. There'll be more fecundity, more production of veligers, for example, or offspring. So in that case, the level of effort you put in today might work, but in 20 years it won't work because the waters are warmer. So understanding when your actions are not going to have an effect is also critical to pivoting and then considering alternative perspectives like acceptance or directing change. And then they also highlight that we'll never have perfect knowledge, but we can improve our knowledge with better tracking. So that could be using things like eRNA, not just eDNA. RNA is the more rapidly turning over genetic information. So it's not just, was this critter ever here, but is it currently here and is it producing right now? And also just use of AI, not really being used in this field as much as they weren't. And just to put this in perspective from the golden mussel ideas, the task force is still in full-on resist mode. This is a big deal. And so they're considering things like chemical things like Zequinox that's been used on zebra and quagga mussels before, biological approaches like gene swamping. So basically, putting infertile organisms out there and letting those genes pass through the population and make these mussels less fertile. And then physical approaches like things like tarps and introducing turbulence and things like that. And then I wanted to plug their work on quagga and zebra mussel, two other really bad invasives. $44 million has been spent since 2008 by CDFW on mussel control, and they've been fairly successful in holding those spreads to a manageable level. But I do want to plug that this paper is about European green crab, but golden mussel is of particular concern because, like European green crab, it is so tolerant of a wide range of conditions that it's going to be especially hard to eliminate if we don't restrict the spread now. So, any questions on this paper?
Just to contain, not to eradicate.
That's the goal right now. Yeah, you might be able to eradicate with that gene technique where you put enough of an infertile gene into the population, then it spreads, but that might take 20 years until you've, made it infertile. Yeah. Okay, great, thanks. All right, then let's move forward to the next slide, please. So some of our main updates. The first one, the Delta Science Plan update is well underway, and we aim to release a draft for public review in a few months, and then a final version in spring 2026. We structure this around 4 overarching grand challenges you've heard before. These are ones that we've decided have faced the Delta collectively. And with a lot of community feedback, we've ended up with 533 individual comments and suggestions on how to move forward, and they've been compiled to represent a broad range of approaches to tackle those challenges. Also, there's an appendix section that's very useful resource for the community. 9 of the appendices from the 2019 version of the Delta Science Plan are undergoing revisions right now. And That's to reflect current practices, basically to update how things are done. And 2 new resource appendices are being added. One is on data governance, portals, and online resources. And another one's on social science integration to natural science workflows. And these new additions reflect emerging needs that are identified, that have been identified through workshops and broader engagement efforts. Okay, also a big product that just came out was the Healthy Rivers and Landscapes Science Plan Review. Again, this is what used to be called voluntary agreements. This is the science plan that was reviewed. It was completed in June as requested by the Department of Water Resources. The purpose was to provide the HRL Program Science Committee with recommendations to improve the science plan. And the review considered how the HRL science plan could support the development of individual plans by watershed and reports that would be required as part of the HRL program, including the triennial progress reports and a final ecological outcomes analysis report. DWR has seen the reviews and they've expressed confidence that these are in fact useful to their science plan adjustments moving forward. And the 3 reviewers were specialists in fisheries, structured decision-making, and monitoring. Their comments were related to monitoring protocols, adaptive management, high priority uncertainties to address, and hypotheses that could be included. So some ideas of moving forward on things that weren't addressed, like missed opportunities. And then the links to all of those products, again, very transparent process, are all on our website, and you're welcome to take a look at that at your convenience. All right, so things on your radar. There's 2 major events coming up that we are the hosts of, or we're deeply involved in. One is the Adaptive Management Forum. We host this every 2 years, and the goal is to increase adaptive management capacity in the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta for ecosystem restoration, water management, and beyond. The presentations, panel discussions, and poster sessions are on day 1, and they're here in the California Natural Resource Agency building. And then day 2 is a field trip to Lookout Slough. The presenters and the panelists will share lessons and insights from all stages of the adaptive management cycle to showcase successes, gaps, and future needs. It's a hybrid event, and we hope to engage a broad swath of the community. The registration is already indicating that we have a diverse participant list, so let's keep growing that. You can attend day 1 in person or virtually, but on day 2, the attendance is in person only and space is limited. So the registration link is in your packet, and we invite the community also to share any research, management, or implementation project via a poster, with those abstracts being due about 3 weeks before the forum. And the links again are in the packet and online. All right, another big one coming up is December 4th. We have the Delta Invasive Species Forum. It's also every 2 years. It's free. It's here again at the CNRA building. And the speakers will include, for example, Abby Keller just talked about her paper on the RAD framework. And it's organized by the Delta Interagency Invasive Species Coordination Team. This year's theme is Modeling and Managing Invasive Species for Tomorrow's Delta. The symposium is a forum for managers, researchers, and decision makers to share and synthesize information, best practices, and lessons learned. The links are in the agenda packet. Okay, other things to highlight. The golden mussel update. I do believe Elizabeth has something to share and smell. I'm not sure how contained it is, but Elizabeth was able to procure. Oh, you can Vanna White. You can.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe we can
Okay.
pass this around to the mall.
Okay, there we go. There we go. I think these are worth looking at. So again, California Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Department of Water Resources actually gave us this.
Yeah.
The samples came from Department of Water Resources, and you have that.
Thank you. No, that's great. Thank you, DWR, for those. And I believe the sample actually is showing sort of the intake effects of it's a pipe, right?
Yeah. So this
Do you want-
I'll bring this around because it's a little large, but thanks to DWR staff, we have a piece of the actual pipe that was the initial detection site for golden mussels. So I'll bring it around. It's a section of the pipe. They also provided a a fact sheet just kind of describing it. So I'll just carry it around because it's a little heavy. A little awkward to carry.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, it's a good example.
I'll just bring it around.
So the Department of Fish and Wildlife, again, is in charge of this Golden Mussels Task Force. They're pushing forward on monitoring and research to pinpoint vulnerable settings and conditions and connectivity, again, how connected these systems are. Hoping to reduce invasions with inspections and the clean, drain, dry boat stickers. If you're moving your boat around, you have to get one of these seals to move from, from water body to water body. And these are found at launches throughout the state. I know that that's making a difference in some places. I was just up in Lake Tahoe and they caught a golden mussel last weekend. They were so excited at the one of the launch locations. So it is working. And most of these systems are volunteer run. And so when the sports fishing funds were put forward of about $1 million to shore up efforts, that's really helpful to start to build out that first line of defense to catch these boats before they enter another water body. I also know that Diane Burgess is involved with this bill that is led by Tom Harder to contain and eradicate mussels nationally, and so we'll see how that bill progresses. All right, and then away from golden mussels, going back to our program, we have news on the social science extension specialist front. We are excited to welcome Dr. Tara Posey, and I don't know if Tara's in the room, but she started on August 1st, and she will be a familiar face to some of us. She was part of the 2022 Delta Science Fellows cohort, and in her role, she'll be based out of UC Davis and will conduct research, education, and outreach projects that address the human dimensions of Delta water and ecosystem management. So welcome to Tara, and again, looking forward to all that she brings to the council's priorities. And that's all my updates. I want to turn it over to our guest speakers, which I believe we have in a Zoom.
Dr. Wyndham Myers, would you mind running us through the by the numbers while we wait for our online presenters?
Absolutely. No
Thank you so much.
Okay. All right. So by the numbers, these numbers look a whole lot like they did in July. Some things to highlight are, again, the temperatures in the lower left. We're doing great. We're holding at expected temperatures with our three main metrics here. The rainfall, it's interesting. The Central Sierra was at 64% last month, and now it's at 78%. A little bit of that is because of that monsoonal rain that we just got this past weekend. So there is some rainfall. And the flows down on the lower right, you can see we actually have a bump up of the diversion values. That was about 7,500 CFS last time. So that's been bumped up. And then the Sacramento river flows are slightly down. They were about 23,000 last month. But what's really down again is Vernalis. So it's really dropping. It's the flows are low on the San Joaquin, and that salinity number is also creeping up again. So it's something that, obviously it's being managed and taken care of with reservoir releases as needed. And so I want to give also a shout out to Ted Flynn at DWR for keeping me posted on how those values are changing through the summer. So it's, again, they're keeping tabs on keeping that salinity number down by like New Melones releases and Millerton Lake releases and such. And then so reservoir storage, let's look up there. Everything looks about normal for what we would expect at this time of year. Nothing extremely different than what we saw in July. I wanted to address the question that Ben Hueso asked last time, which was basically, why is there not more storage being used in San Luis? Like, why are we not putting more water there? It was a good question. And as we all know, that it is an off-stream reservoir for carryover storage from Delta water for both the Central Valley Project and State Water Project use. And so This storage isn't necessarily natural, it's pumped into here. And it's subject to all kinds of operational considerations. So that includes spring flow requirements and endangered species requirements. And so it's normal to see a lagging effect of curtailed spring pumping and then a bump up later in summer and fall. And while there is indeed work being done on the Sisk Dam to raise it 10 feet and then increase the reservoir capacity by about 5%, it is a big reservoir, so it's never really full. So we haven't been using it for that. It would take a lot of it's 2 million acre feet, so it would take a lot of diversion to actually fill it, and that's not usually the priority. I looked through all the BTNs, all the by the numbers, going back to 2013 to see if it's ever been at capacity or what the patterns are, and it's never been so. It's rarely above 100% of normal. Notably, in 2017, it was 200% of normal, but that was a really wet year. And then in 2016, after a sequence of dry years, was actually at 30% of normal. So there's no real story now other than what would be expected at this time. With managed aquifer recharge coming online, I also think there's other places to put these waters. So I'm not really sure how the reservoir will be managed in the future. But again, that's what's controlling the volume in here is management operations and decisions about where's the best place to put those diverted waters. So yeah, it's nice to have long-term records to compare to. That's all.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much for looking into that.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for the question.
Right. Do we have our speakers on yet, Emma?
We do not have our speakers on yet. We are also ahead of schedule.
We are ahead of
If you'd
schedule.
like to take maybe a 5-minute.
Yeah, why don't we give them 5 minutes? We'll come back at, let's see, why don't we come back at, we'll do an 8-minute break. We'll come back at 10:15.
Awesome.
Okay.
All right.
10:15, we'll be right back.
Member Wayso.
All right, welcome back. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'll turn it back over to Lisa Marie to introduce our next panelists.
And a quick reminder that if you're up at the mic, just make sure that mic is nice and close to you while you're speaking. That'll cut back on the feedback noise. Thank you.
Okay. All right, then let me just highlight then two women scientists that I am so grateful that they were willing to join us today for this call. I'm sorry, the call in for today's meeting. Dr. Rochelle Tanner of Chapman University and Dr. Christine Whitcraft of California State University, Long Beach. They will be describing results of their invasive species research that was recently funded by the council with an emphasis on collaboration and recommendations for improving future invasive species responses. So Rochelle and Christine, are you online?
I'm here.
Yes, hi.
Great, thank you. Take it away.
Christine, would you like me to share this?
That would be great if you can do that.
We have your slides here, and we'll get those up for you presently.
Oh, great.
And you can.
Oh, great. So we don't have to screen share.
Yep. And you can just give us a cue with next slide, and we'll move those for you as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys for the opportunity to talk today. We wanted to begin by thanking all of the people that go into doing this style work, and I'll talk a little bit about my lab, and Rochelle will talk about hers, and then we're going to alternate as we go through the slides talking about the different pieces of this story around invasive species and early detection and rapid response. So on behalf of my lab, I had a significant number of undergraduates involved in the research, as well as a master's student and technician, Anita Arenas.
And our team was also a lot of undergraduates, but it was a 5-institution partnership with a lot of universities and 3 postdocs, facilitated greatly by the Sassoon Resource Conservation District.
And we both wanted to acknowledge that we were supported by funding both from our institution and then from the Delta Stewardship Council as well. So if you could go to the next slide. Part of where this story begins is what you guys all know well, but in December of 2021, as part of the Delta Invasive Species Symposium, there was a draft early detection and rapid response framework and coordination table for the Delta that was released by the DISC team. And it helped define key terms. It summarized what resources existed for the region. But in that, release, there was some key elements that were identified that held back sort of the EDRR process as well as invasive species management in general. They're highlighted on this slide, but they found that a lot of efforts, and it's not just in the Delta, this would be across invasive species work in general, are often siloed by taxonomic group. For example, aquatic vegetation is considered in isolation. It's also often siloed by organizational jurisdiction, say a weed management area. And one of the challenges is there are a few structures that coordinate actions among the groups within existing programs. Even more so than the potential structures, there's not a lot of communication structures between what are the prevention and monitoring efforts and the actual programs. And people are consistently working on this, but at the time, there hadn't really been an analysis that looked at each one of those identified gaps or really looked at the process of early detection and rapid response in itself. So that's part of what drove both my work on this and Rochelle's and her lab's work on this. So if you could go to the next slide. Thank you. So these are a list of the mixed methods by which we approached that problem and sort of call to action that I discussed in the last slide. These were funded as two separate projects, and here's where you'll see Rochelle and I pass on and off between these, but they had shared goals. And because we are aware of each other's work and because we were connected by the funder, we have an intentional overlap in our methodology, right down to the type of questions that may have been asked on surveys. So we're going to briefly run through some of the key findings from all these different components. And what you'll see is the subsequent slides all have the data set or the approach that we're referring to in the blue top header so that we keep everyone aware. I'm going to first tackle this idea of literature review and a really practitioner-based approach to surveys. And then I'll pass it off to Rochelle to discuss numbers 3 through 7 about expert surveys, more general public in terms of landowner, researchers, and the larger public in the Sassoon. So next slide, please. One of the challenges of invasive species work, as everyone knows, is that the time frame on which one needs to respond can be faster than some of the organizational structures or policy and science processes move. So we set out to think a lot about how a literature review process would work around an emerging invasive species and potentially where that could be sped up to inform an early detection and rapid response process. Our example for this study was Vallisneria, which is an introduced submerged aquatic vegetation to the Delta. And we approached it knowing that the literature review hadn't necessarily been conducted for this species, but it was already existing in the Delta. We all know that a literature review is time consuming. Extracting the proper information can require access to library resources that aren't available to everyone, expertise to pull out the main points, and as people get more familiar with scientific literature, the literature review process improves. So one action item that came out of this portion of our study was the idea that literature reviews might be assembled ahead of time for those invasive species that are likely, and this could be done in different formats that would be funded different ways, but it would include the information that might need to go into policy documents to be created quickly. Next slide, please. Also, in terms of results, what we had done was conduct surveys and stakeholder interviews with practitioners in the Delta. We had done this and pulled out some emergent themes that you'll see here. I won't I have a lot more details on all of them, but for the purposes of just bringing everyone up to speed on where we are, we really found that part of what the goals were was these fell into big categories of making sure that we are operationalizing processes beyond individuals. This means that sort of moving processes up to institutions to ensure that the work was sustainable. That obviously immediately ties back to funding, which we all know is critical. But some of the ways that the funding could be, prioritized was suggested around pilot testing and altering position descriptions to include that. Feeding directly into some of the things that'll be discussed later, we talked about improving surveillance efforts and then coordinating reporting, which brings us to a lot of our next steps. And then making sure that we really understand and leverage existing community and communication strategies. Next slide. The final sort of action was to take all of those emergent themes and just say, what are the next actions? What can we do right away? We pulled these into 6 boxes, and you'll see these repeated. A lot of it has to do with how do we message around invasive species and their detection, and how do we make sure that those enter into a place, storage, monitoring program, et cetera, where they can be, acted upon. We also wanted to find synergy and leverage messages. We wanted to, make sure invasive species lists were maintained, which we've already seen action on. And we wanted to make sure that we linked with existing structures. And then to transition to the sort of where next steps are, if you just hit next, you'll see that we're going to focus a lot on this consistent messaging. So next slide, please. And if you do it one more time, I'm just highlighting that a lot of our emergent first actions are around how do we communicate to people, stakeholders, landowners, et cetera, in a way that makes sure we detect and report on these species. And then next slide, and I'll turn it over to you, Rochelle.
Thanks, Christine. So like what Christine is saying is what's coming out of a lot of both of our work is that communication framing is one of the most important things we can be doing. And this really emphasizes the role of social science in the Delta and the value of interdisciplinary work. Both Christine and I are biologists, but we both do a lot of social science because we see this value. And this is the theoretical framework that we use for this social science study. Framing, as it relates to collective action, uses specific words to target sense of belonging in certain communities. So the way that you feel about your actions has to do with how you're messaged to. Next slide. So the first thing we wanted to understand is who should be delivering this message. And when we talked to experts across the country involved in Phragmites control, which is the case study species that I used, they emphasized the importance of shared cultural values, moderate management power, so the ability to give out money but not to regulate. I think if we've ever worked with a landowner, you understand this perspective. They also emphasize showing policymakers and managers firsthand damage in the field, critically underscoring the importance of public outreach. This is not something that even came up when we were talking about the proposal when it went in, but it became more and more important to talk about what is the public's role, not just private landowners public, but the public visitors of this area. And so for us, what this meant was there was really only one candidate in Sassoon Marsh for a trusted communicator that could be given the communication framework to use, and that was the Sassoon Resource Conservation District. Next slide. I think you can hit next one more time. And one more time, sorry. So we evaluated values among Sassoon landowners. So these are the duck club owners that control most of the land that's not owned by DWR and Cal Fish and Wildlife. And when we asked them about why they value the land and why they should protect it from invasive species, they statistically significantly said that they wanted to protect their waterfowl habitat and their ability to hunt on the land. And when we asked them a little bit more about this, about how do they know if something is invasive, They again said that it impacts their waterfowl habitat. So something is invasive if it impedes their ability to hunt. And so this has a lot of management implications since they control so much of Sassoon Marsh and the way that we manage the ecosystem at large. Going back to that trusted manager, trusted communicator piece, 91.2% of them said that they themselves felt familiar with invasive species, but they preferred that the SRCD would tell them that something is invasive. So 80% of them, regardless of whether they think something is invasive, they're waiting for the SRCD to tell them that it's invasive before they do anything. Next slide. We followed up with some interviews to kind of delve into why they're making these decisions and where they're getting their information from. Like Christine said, this primary knowledge acquisition of doing literature reviews is really a huge barrier for anyone who doesn't have an advanced science degree. And so they're not doing it. They're not reading the literature. They prefer to receive their knowledge through an intermediary or in an application format. And so this is where the SRCD's water managers have been the key point of this trusted communication framework that we've developed for Phragmites. Even the water managers say that's our job. It is our job to communicate these things and to work with the landowners directly. We also found that they're not really reading online things or printed resources. They prefer a phone call. And so this is like really not compatible with a lot of the ways that we communicate in science. And it's something we need to think about. The last thing I want to point out on this slide is that landowners advocated for more public outreach, visitor outreach. They thought it was important too. And so this is something that's coming up again and again, communicating to the public that is not being considered in our current frameworks. Next slide. Now, I talked about the types of language that are used to communicate about invasive species, and I really mean specific words. And so we went in and tested a lot of different words that are being used in the current Delta plans and the Science Action Agenda. And we've found some lists of words that we recommend based on their positive emotional association with action in folks who are participating in invasive species management. And we found some words that elicited a very strong negative reaction. And so we've separated these into categories. And what I did was I went back and asked Delta researchers whether they could identify words that landowners preferred or didn't prefer. And they achieved a less than half accuracy. So there's a difference in the literacy of our researchers and the people who are actually doing the actions on the ground. And we need to work on, making sure those overlap a little bit more. Next step. Now, we actually were able to talk to the public, even though it wasn't in our original proposal. We put out a national survey focused on wetland areas in California and Florida. And we asked them how they would report sightings of things that they thought might be invasive, and who they would report them to, where they would want that information to go, and how they want to do it. And by and large, they wanted to report that information on a paper form or on a social media platform. They really did not want to talk to a ranger or someone out there. And they thought the information should go to federal and state agencies. And so what the public believes is that local land managers, state and federal agencies, and the private landowners are equally responsible for this burden. Only 7% of respondents didn't think that the government was trustworthy for this information, which I think goes against what a lot of us colloquially think, that the public doesn't trust the government. And very few people thought that they shouldn't be involved in the process. So the public wants to be involved in EDRR, but we need to make sure that they have the pathway to do so. Next slide. So given all this information, Christine and I are ready to implement this. We've come up with a project to experimentally implement these methods that we know are preferred alongside any new restoration projects coming online in the Delta. We have plans to focus on repairing and building relationships with community groups, especially those from disadvantaged communities who disproportionately use this area to fish. And we have a lot of good plans for strengthening the language based on all of the surveys and interviews that we've done. So if this sounds like something you want us to connect us to someone who's already working on this or has a restoration project that would be perfect for this, please let us know. Our emails are here. And if you're curious on whether you are better than the researchers that have already taken this survey, next slide, you can see whether you can do better at figuring out what language landowners like to hear when they talk about invasive species. That's the end of our slides. Christine, do you have anything else to add?
Nope, that's great. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for having us.
Great, thank you, Dr. Tanner and Dr. Whitcraft. I'm curious, there's one slide that you broke out on just a little bit, Rochelle, and it was the one where you said that they wanted to see the information reported to the state and federal agencies. I was just surprised by that. Could you go back to that slide and just speak to?
Yeah, the public.
Yes.
So we were also surprised at this. This is a sample size of 800 people living in a zip code near a wetland. I think it's like 2 slides above this. Yeah. Yeah, folks largely indicated, like over 50% of them indicated that they wanted their report when they made it at the site to go to a state and federal agency. They thought that that was the group responsible for dealing with invasive species. And we gave all sorts of answers, possible answers, like local community groups, resource conservation districts. They wanted it to go to the federal level. So there might be a literacy campaign that might need to be done here.
Great. Well, I could see a lot of feedback from you both for our science action agenda, which you're going to hear about next. So thank you for that deep dive into the terms that are used. I think we can just open it to questions.
Any members have any questions? No, that was an excellent presentation. I learned a lot. Thank you very much, both of you, for being here.
I just have a comment that I was expecting that it would be hard to get information from the property owner about something so specialized and scientific. So, but the effort is appreciable. I mean, that they at least tried.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Emma, do we have any public comment on this item?
We have no public comment in Sacramento, Madam Chair.
None in Eureka.
None in San Antonio.
All right. Then we'll move on to agenda item number 8, which is the snapshot progress summary of the 2022 through 2026 Science Action Agenda. And I'll turn it back over to Dr. Lisa Marie Wyndham-Myers to introduce our next panel.
Great. Well, it is a pleasure to introduce our environmental scientist, Kim Luke, to give you some progress on our Science Action Agenda summary of where we are right now in terms of implementing this agenda. And I'm looking forward to this presentation. Thank you so much, Kim.
Okay, yay, this works, awesome. Hello, Chair, hello, council members. My name is Kim Luke. I'm an environmental scientist in the Collaborative Science and Peer Review Unit. And today I am presenting on the 2022-2026 Science Action Agenda Snapshot Progress Summary. I will start with an overview of the Science Action Agenda. In simplest terms, the Science Action Agenda, or SAA as I'll refer to it, is a list of research priorities for the Delta. It's a document developed by and for the Delta community, led by the Council's Delta Science Program, or DSP. The SAA outlines priority science actions needed to address specific Delta management needs, providing a clear roadmap for science to inform management and decision-making. Along with the Delta Science Plan, which is a shared framework for better coordinating science in the Delta that you heard about just now in the LSR, and the State of Bay Delta Science, which is an ongoing synthesis and communication effort about Delta science that I believe you'll hear about next month. The SAA supports the Council's vision of One Delta, One Science. The development of the SAA is a public collaborative process, and it's updated about every 5 years or so to ensure that the science priorities still reflect the needs of the community. We are currently implementing the second full iteration of the SAA for 2022 to 2026, but it's not just for us. We invite our partners to leverage the SAA in guiding their work or funding decisions. In order to understand the importance of the SAA today, it's helpful to discuss the landscape of Delta research before its creation. As you may know, in the CalFed days prior to the creation of the council, there were concerns over the lack of transparency regarding what was funded and why. There wasn't clear guidance on what research should be prioritized. And once the Delta Stewardship Council was established and the first Delta Science Plan was created, it called for a science action agenda that would act as a roadmap to organize, integrate, and prioritize research in the Delta. This image that we have here on the screen of the Delta Governance Network from the 2019 Delta Science Plan shows just how complex governance is in the Delta. The SAA gives this intricate network a central agenda to advance management relevant research and to give these entities a say in what the Delta's science priorities should be. The SAA we have today provides precise science actions that address priority management needs, and it unifies and catalyzes Delta research. The Council and the DSP also play a critical funding role in the Delta and use the SAA to guide funding and scope solicitations. According to the 2022-23 cross-cut budget that was released last year, the majority of funding in the Delta is for monitoring, and things like targeted research or synthesis receive less. But for those categories, the DSP contributions make up a large portion. And from 2018 to 2023, the DSP was consistently the third largest funder in the Delta overall. The DSP also runs competitive funding opportunities on consistent cycles rather than something like a prop that may be a one-time pot of money. And this offers researchers a stable and reliable source of funding. And you just heard about some of that funding from Drs. Whitcraft and Tanner. They both received various DSP funding opportunities to address gaps in the SAA. All of this to say that the DSP's funding is unique and it's a critical part of advancing research in the Delta, and it uses the SAA to guide these important science investments. With the first full iteration, which is the 2017-2021 SAA, the Council guided over $42 million of science funding investments with support from the DSP, U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and state water contractors. So in addition to guiding funding, the SAA also informs other efforts at the Council. Those include the Delta Collaboratory, the Delta Synthesis Working Group, the CHABS monitoring strategy, and reviews led by the Delta Independent Science Board. Recently, there have been funding challenges, including state budget problems and reduced funding participation from other agencies. So it's really critical that the DSP continues to fund impactful interdisciplinary research to ensure effective implementation of the current SAA. To briefly kind of go over the structure of the SAA, right now it has 6 overarching management needs. They're not listed in any particular order or ranking, and they focus on improved integration and coordination of research, enhanced monitoring and modeling, managing the Delta as a social ecological system, equitable management of Delta communities, species ecosystem health, and climate change impacts and adaptive management. For each of these management needs, there are between 3 to 5 priority science actions, and in total there are 25 priority science actions. And through the collaborative and public process of developing the SAA, the Delta community identified these specific science actions that can help address each of the 6 management needs. And just to give an example, I'll highlight management need 6, which is about climate change impacts and adaptive management. One of the 5 associated science actions would be 6A, which is to evaluate how climate change, sea level rise, and more frequent extremes will impact habitats, water supply, water quality, sediment supply, long-term species persistence, primary productivity, and food webs. So to address the concern of reduced funding that I mentioned earlier and making sure that we are really funding impactful and interdisciplinary research projects, the DSP is developing the SAA Snapshot Progress Summary to evaluate current progress of SAA implementation. The first goal of the snapshot is to assess which management needs and science actions are being advanced, by funded projects, which ones are being advanced the least, just sort of measure this progress. The second goal is to inform how the DSP continues implementation and future SAA iterations. For example, results from the snapshot can offer an opportunity to focus resources on management needs and science actions seeing the least progress. And the third goal of the snapshot is to provide feedback for improving the DSP solicitation process. To achieve these goals, the snapshot assessed specific projects funded since 2022, and the snapshot identified which science actions have been advanced, how many projects are contributing to each science action, the status of projects, whether they're initiated, ongoing, or completed, and the amount of funding allocated to implementing the SAA and by the DSP and funding partners so far. So this snapshot progress summary included 38 research projects, and those included Delta Science Fellow projects from 2022 and 25, Delta Research Award projects from 2025, directed actions from several different years, and projects that have been funded by the state water contractors. These projects were selected because they had to demonstrate implementation of the SAA in their proposals. And again, because the SAA is the guiding document for priority Delta research, it's important that the DSP-funded projects clearly advance implementation and support the Council's mission of best available science. To start, DSP staff reviewed and confirmed the accuracy of science actions mentioned in each proposal and provided justification detailing whether a project contributed to an identified science action or not. In instances where proposals did not mention science actions, DSP staff identified appropriate ones. For proposals that addressed multiple science actions, DSP staff assigned priority levels that identified a primary, secondary, and tertiary science action, and the levels indicated the extent to which a project contributed to a science action. While some projects addressed more than 3 science actions, for the purpose of the snapshot, only the primary, secondary, and tertiary ones were included to focus on the most meaningful contributions to the SAA. From there, staff collected additional data needed, such as project status and funding amounts, and that information came from proposals and from the Delta Science Tracker. And then from there, analysis and visualizations were completed in RStudio, which is a coding and statistics program. So let's talk results. This is my favorite part. So this plot shows the number of projects contributing to each science action, and it's faceted by management need. The bars are color-coded to match the corresponding management needs, with the science actions being listed on the y-axis and the number of projects on the corresponding x-axis. And I do want to note that projects may be represented more than once in this plot because they address multiple science actions. So first, we see that all 6 management needs and 22 out of 25 science actions are being advanced by funded research projects. The number of projects per science action range from 1 to 13 projects, but most have 3 or less projects advancing them each. The science actions with the most project contributions are 5B, 2A, and 1A. And these are science actions related to management needs concerning species, ecosystem, and health, enhanced monitoring and modeling, and improved integration and coordination, respectively. These projects often involve fish research and creating accessible data repositories. It's also worth noting that projects funded by state water contractors have concentrated their resources on specific science actions, namely those that focus on fish and evaluations of monitoring. And then 3 science actions are not currently being advanced by the priority science actions of any funded projects, and those are 2C, 6B, and 6C. And these are science actions related to management needs about enhanced monitoring and modeling and impacts of climate change and adaptive management. The caveat with this plot, as I mentioned before, is that some projects selected more than 3 science actions, but for this analysis, we only focused on those top 3. But for each project, most of them address 2 or more science actions and include multiple management needs within each project, which shows that the DSP and its funding partners are funding interdisciplinary projects responsive to the SAA. Additionally, the number of projects contributing to a science action doesn't necessarily line up with the amount of funding, and that's something that we're looking at further into in the snapshot. The total amount of funding allocated to implementation of this current SAA to date is over $16 million, with the biggest sort of funding groups of being the 2025 DRAs funded by the council and the projects funded by state water contractors, which include years 2023 and 25. As previously mentioned, the first iteration of the SAA had invested $42 million. And currently with our 16 million, that's about 40% of that. However, as I mentioned before, there are funding limitations compared to what was available before. And again, that's sort of due to budget shortfalls and less funding participation from other agencies. And with less than 2 years remaining for implementation of this current SAA and less funding available compared to the previous iteration, the DSP is considering, how to best leverage this information provided by the snapshot. Despite these limitations, though, it's really promising to see that these projects funded by the DSP and partners are diverse and interdisciplinary, and the DSP is grateful for the state water contractors and their funding contributions of roughly $6 million for this SAA. There we go. Lastly, the snapshot considered the status of each project, which is pretty evenly distributed across initiated or projects that are only just beginning, ongoing, which have research in progress, and completed, which have finished their research or funding period. Initiated projects make up about 37% of total projects, and these are mostly the 2025 Delta Science Fellows and Delta Research Award projects, which began this spring. Ongoing projects comprise 29%, and these are predominantly funded by state water contractors, and they began in 2023. And completed projects make up the remaining 34% and are mostly 2-year Delta Science Fellow projects that were funded in 2022. So given the 16 million in funding that we've had so far, and that 2/3 of these projects are not yet complete, and only half of those are just beginning, the overall progress of implementing this SAA is still in the earlier stages when we look at this more narrow focus of projects. Just to go over the big hits, the key takeaways from this snapshot, there are a wide range of science actions and management needs that are being contributed to by the $16 million of funding from the DSP and state water contractors. And many of those projects are interdisciplinary and address multiple management needs. Overall, progress of implementation is in the earlier stages, and for many projects, deliverables and products that will help further implementation are not yet available. But it's also important to note that this is our first time that we're doing this sort of midpoint summary. Previously, we had only done a progress summary at the end. So this is really a great opportunity to use these findings to ensure that the rest of implementation is as effective as possible. The DSP also looks forward to conducting a full assessment of progress that considers projects from the broader Delta science community and not just ones that are funded by the DSP or state water contractors, but are addressing the SAA. So again, this is just a very narrow slice of all the research that's going on in the Delta. And while we do anticipate conducting, this full assessment of the current SAA, we are considering extending implementation of this current SAA past 2026. So for next steps, the DSP will incorporate the feedback we hear today and release the complete snapshot later this fall. Next year, the DSP plans to conduct outreach with other implementing or funding partners to seek their support, and with the broader Delta science community to discuss the snapshot and next steps. Towards the end of implementation, the DSP will begin that full progress summary. But before that, Ash Semenik is leading work on the research impacts assessment, which looks at outcomes from past funded projects. And that'll be another opportunity to communicate the impacts of the council's funding on the Delta community. And I believe Ash will be presenting about that to the council in the coming months. So you'll get to hear about that soon. So thank you. With that, my presentation is over and we can take questions, and you can scan the QR code if you'd like. Oh, I forgot to say, so many slides ago, there was a QR code of the SAA, so you can also scan that if you want to read it. Thank you.
All right, that was great. Do any members have any questions? Yeah, really good.
I have a quick question, if
I-
I may. So how much did we estimate that the implementing the full action agenda would cost? Do you recall?
90 million.
It was about 80 to 90 million
There we go.
dollars.
So of two sources that we've been able to track, we've got 16 million. And the others that we're primarily going to look at are probably what, like some of our federal partners and maybe DWR, who would be the other major funders?
Yeah, and correct me, Lisa Marie, if I'm wrong. I think, the intention was never that the DSP funds that full 80 to 90, but if, you wanted to have full implementation of it, it would take roughly that much.
And how do you think that the council can help promote the implementation of the SAA?
Yeah, I think just bringing awareness as much as possible. If you're hearing from people about the research that they do or things that they're working on, ask them if they're familiar with the SAA or if they use it to guide their projects and research. And yeah, send them my way. I'll love to talk to them about it.
Great. Well, thank you. That was wonderful. Appreciate it. Whoops. Do we have any public comment on this item?
None in Sacramento, Madam Chair.
Okay.
None in Eureka. That was great. Thank you.
And none in San Antonio. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. We're going to move on to agenda item number 9, which is the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, along with the Department of Fish and Wildlife and council staff are going to present on the Webb Tract Wetland Restoration Project designed to restore wetland and open water habitats on Webb Tract in the Central Delta. So we have Ava Bush, our program manager, regulatory review unit here at the council, and Mitsuko Grube, senior environmental scientist supervisor from sorry, is that right? CDFW. And then Melinda Stalvey from Metropolitan. Oh, okay, got it. So Mitsuko is online. Got it. Okay, that's what we're doing.
And they are, and they're ready to go.
Okay, great. Take it away, Ava.
Bring your microphone closer.
And turn it on. Sorry. I thought I saw the green light. Good morning, council members. Chair Lee. We're here today to talk about the Webb Tract Restoration Project. The council has previously heard presentations from lead agencies and CDFW for 2 other projects using the statutory exemption for restoration projects, or SERP. First, in August 2023, the Knights and Wetland Restoration and Flood Protection Project. And then in February 2024, the Staten Island Wetland Restoration and Carbon Farming for Habitat, Climate, and Communities Project. Today, Mitsuko Grube from California Department of Fish and Wildlife will talk about the SERP CEQA exemption, and which is part of the Cutting the Green Tape initiative. Then Melinda Stalvey from Metropolitan Water District will talk about the Webb Tract Wetland Restoration Project. We will end by talking about how this project aligns with the Delta Plan and relevant Delta Plan considerations. We invite you to ask questions as we go along, but there will also be time at the end to ask questions. Next slide, please. I guess I should have said that first. You can forward one more. One more. Thank you. You'll hear about this more in detail shortly, so I will give you a very brief overview now. The statutory exemption for restoration projects, or SERP, is administered by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. First, the restoration project must meet specific qualifying criteria, and the lead agency must determine if the project qualifies. And then the Director of Fish and Wildlife must then concur with the agency's determination for the SERP to be used. Next slide, please. The Webb Tract restoration project was proposed by Metropolitan and was determined by them to meet the SERP criteria, and the Director of Fish and Wildlife concurred. It should be noted that both Metropolitan and CDFW have coordinated with the council throughout this process. And I will now hand it over to Mitsuko from CDFW and Melinda from Metropolitan for their presentation.
Hi there. Everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Apologies for not being there in person. I'm Mitsuko Gruba, and I am the cutting green tape supervisor for the CDFW Bay Delta region. Next slide. The Cutting Green Tape program is a statewide effort to increase the pace and scale of habitat restoration by creating and implementing new environmental permitting and grant funding tools. Next slide. Next. SERP is a CEQA exemption pathway for eligible restoration projects of any size. Next. It was signed into law by Governor Newsom on September 23rd, 2021, which added the section 21080.56 to the California Public Resources Code. SERP was originally approved through January 1st of 2025, but it was just recently extended on July 2nd of 2024 for another 5 years. So now it's set to expire on January 1st of 2030. Lead agencies must determine if their projects meet the SERP criteria as listed in the California Public Resources Code, subdivisions A through D. Next. Subdivision A says that in order for a project to qualify for this exemption, a project must be exclusively one of the following: a project to conserve, restore, protect, or enhance, and assist in the recovery of California native fish and wildlife and the habitat upon which they depend. Or B, a project to restore or provide habitat for California native fish and wildlife. Now, those both basically sound very similar. They can, any project can qualify and still meet both of those criteria, or they could choose to meet one or the other. Next. Back one. So a subdivision A states that the project must be exclusively restoration, but subdivision B allows the possibility for incidental public benefits, such as public access or recreation. Next. One. Yeah. Section C states that for a project to qualify for SERP, the project must do both of the following. So first one would be result in long-term net benefits to the following 3 categories, which is climate resiliency, biodiversity, and sensitive species recovery. And they must include procedures and ongoing management for the protection of the environment. This is essentially the avoidance and minimization measures and or best management practices that a project can follow during the implementation of a project and during any adaptive management of that project. Next. Subdivision D states that the project will only include construction activities that are solely related to that habitat restoration project. Next. And then the lead agency must obtain the CDFW director's concurrence for those determinations made pursuant to subdivisions A through D. Next. One more. So the SERP process includes the following lead agency responsibilities. So first one would be to request a consultation with CDFW. Then the next one is, while it's not part of the statute, it is very important to the director and the department that project proponents conduct tribal outreach. Sending out a letter with no tribal response doesn't count as outreach. So we want to see that meaningful outreach has been conducted with any tribes that are within that project area. The Webb Tract project team took this recommendation a step further and developed the ecocultural working group for the project, which includes tribal partners. Project proponents should also be conducting stakeholder outreach, and the Webb Tract project held several public meetings. The lead agency also makes the initial SERP determination and then submits the request to CDFW. SERP has a very unusual requirement to file a notice of exemption with the Office of Planning and Research within 48 hours of approving any restoration project. And then the CDFW responsibilities are to review the lead agency's initial determinations and to provide the director's written concurrence based on substantial evidence and best available science. And we also post all of the concurrences on the CDFW Cutting Green Tape website. Next. During SERP consultations, we recommend that all proponents who are planning to implement projects within the legal delta to complete a few steps before submitting the SERP request. Even though SERP is a statutory exemption, we still recommend that project proponents coordinate with the council and with Delta Protection Commission. We strongly recommend that they also complete the Delta Plan's Good Neighbor checklist and obtain a letter of support from the Delta Counties Coalition. Those activities go a really long way towards having a much smoother experience when requesting a SERP for projects within the legal delta. Next. Here's a snapshot of our web page. And that purple oval is where you would click to see the concurrences. Next. And then another SERP happened to sneak in this morning. So Webb Tract is now the third one on the list. As the projects are approved and we add them to the website, the newest one is always on the top. So next. Many people are very interested on the information that the SERP has given us. So next. We've had 84 projects, it might be 85 now, submit a SERP form request. Next. So we actually now have 73 concurrences as of this morning. So of course my information is already out of date. So we've had the 3 projects within the Delta. So Eva mentioned them. It was the Knightson project, Staten Island project, and now Webb Tract. And then next. The SERP concurrence is all statewide, encompass about greater than 47,000 acres. Next. We do have a wide variety of projects that are using SERP. We had a watershed-wide Arendo removal project down in Southern California. We've had fish barrier removals in San Mateo County, and we have tidal marsh restoration projects such as Restore Hayward Marsh. These projects all have varying degrees of complexity, and the review can take a little bit longer or not. So on average, CDFW completes SERPs within 42 days. The more complex projects have taken up to 90 days, and our internal goal is to have a SERP approved in less than 60 days. So we're on target there. On average, statewide, projects are saving 8 months and up to, or on average, $127,000 by using SERP. And the Delta projects are saving about 12 months and have a cost savings of between $25,000 and $450,000. And I think that's the end of my slide.
$25,000 to $450,000 in savings for Delta projects.
Okay, I guess I'm up. My name is Melinda Stalvey. I'm a program manager with Metropolitan Water District and the project manager for the Webb Tract Wetland Restoration Project. Thank you for having me here today, Councilwoman Lee, and thank you to the council members for having us here today. Next slide, please. Just a really quick introduction to the team that we've put together. They're local consultants and engineering firms that have been working on the team and outreach specialists as well. And then we've been working very closely with the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta Conservancy for the grant funding for the project. Next slide, please. Metropolitan purchased 5 islands or 4 and part of a 5th island in the Delta in 2016. They've since sold the part of one of those islands, Chips Island, and now Metropolitan is the owner of 4 separate islands in the Central Delta region. 2 of them are located in San Joaquin County and 2 in Sacramento County. We are faced with farming practices that have resulted in substantial peat loss and subsidence on these Delta islands. And Webb Tract in particular is an incredibly deeply subsided island. Anywhere from 12 to 24 feet below sea level is the subsidence. The cost to maintain levees to ensure that the water is kept out of those islands is significant. So Metropolitan was looking for ways that we might be able to reverse subsidence and develop projects that could show the Delta region in general that there is a cost-effective solution to addressing some of these really pressing issues in the Delta. We took our project proposal to the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta Conservancy, who awarded us a $20.9 million grant in October of 2023. That grant funds 2 separate projects. The focus of today's discussion is about the Webb Tract Wetland Restoration Project, but it also funds a rice conversion project on the island. We looked with our consultants on about what the best rice locations for agriculture to continue on the islands. And so those fields have been set aside for rice. And then some of the more deeply subsided locations or some of the upland habitat where there is no more peat soil available have been used for this wetland restoration and upland habitat that we're creating on the island. Next slide, please. So the Wetland Restoration Project, it started out with a concept of trying to develop up to 3,000 acres of wetland on the island. Once we got on the island and really started doing some of the research, we found that if we were to flood 3,000 acres of the island, it would make a lot of open water and it wouldn't meet any of the goals of our grant. That open water would not allow for wetland restoration plants to be growing the tules and the cattails that are needed to reverse the subsidence. And in addition, it would be putting off more greenhouse gas emissions than is already happening on the island. So we we worked on the project, and the current acreage is approximately 2,200 acres of wetland plus existing habitat as well. And I have another slide that gives a bigger breakdown of that. Previous slide, please, just for a second. Thank you. So this project is expected to create a substantial amount of habitat. As I mentioned before, it's around 2,800 acres in total, and will support habitat for reptiles, greenhouse, the giant garter snake, the western pond turtle, several migratory bird species. Will use the island, or we're hoping that we'll use the island. The benefits that we're hoping to get out of this are, as I mentioned, to reverse subsidence, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We're also planning to explore how we can manage the wetland for food web benefits. Can you manage the water flow into and out of the wetlands such that it can increase the amount of phytoplankton and zooplankton that are produced in wetlands? And then when we export that water off the island, are there timing issues or ways that we can export that water with the phytoplankton and zooplankton that could help with food benefits in the river system, surrounding river systems? And then lastly, to explore polluticulture opportunities, which are they're wetland plants. It's the use of wetland plants and potentially to generate revenue from other sources. Examples could be creating biofuel, harvesting some of the tules and cattails for insulation, for other products. So we'll be working on trying to develop further projects in that respect. Next slide, please. There are some significant design considerations and constraints on the island. When you restore a wetland next to a rice field, we need to be able to ensure that the water is going to be maintained such that it's not going to affect the rice fields next to it. We wanted to preserve the existing infrastructure as much as possible, so maintaining the existing levees and access roads, because our levee reclamation districts need to be able to access the levees in at any given time. So being able to preserve our ability to access the pump stations to pump water off the island and the structures that we bring, the siphons that we bring water onto the island was really important. Of course, we want to maximize the subsidence reversal within these wetland management units, and then prioritizing the early inundation of peat soils. But the biggest constraint of all for this island is that it's completely surrounded by water. There's no access by vehicles. There are no roads that go to Webb Tract. So it is, and you have to access it by ferry or by boat, which means all of your construction equipment, all of your monitoring, all of your everything has to be brought over to the island and to do the work on the island, which presents a significant cost increase to a project, but also some challenges logistically speaking. Next slide, please. Mitsuko mentioned that Metropolitan had done something really creative and new, which actually has had a huge benefit for our project, and that's working with an eco-cultural working group. So I actually come from a CEQA background where I did environmental analysis for projects for Metropolitan, and one of the challenges that we always faced was doing a design for a project and then going to doing AB 52 for the tribal outreach, but it was always after the fact. We had already designed the project. So we wanted to do something different, which was to bring the tribal cultural groups or a tribal group in early on in the design process to see how they could incorporate different ideas that we might not have seen before. And so it's been a really interesting process. Our co-leads, Don Hankins and Austin Stevenot, have led a working group of tribal practitioners, people who are they're artists, they are people who harvest plants. And so really just looking at things from a different perspective. And this is a map that they generated that was really, when they were looking at the project, they looked at it from a different angle than we did. But and so we were able to identify ways to reduce the cost of this project by looking at the high ground. They suggested that instead of just building berms all the way around the island to create these wetland management units, that we take advantage of the existing high ground that we had. And so that has reduced the cost substantially, and then we're working with them for future, once the wetland is built, how we can potentially manage that the island in the future. Next slide, please. So this is the current iteration of the proposed wetland project. Everything you see in gray are the rice fields. These were identified by working with a group of farmers to find the best possible land for rice on the island, and then everything else are wetland units, and these are the different depths of waters that you'll see. We have units such that we can flow the water in and out of the islands, but they're really built such that we have a lot of small berms that are meant to be overtopped over time. So we may be starting with the 2,200 acres of wetland, but what we're hoping is that over the next 15 years, that wetland is going to expand as the cattails and the tules start to grow in and fill in that space. Then that wetland unit will spread and move, and we'll end up with more wetland over the years. And so that's sort of a planned obsolescence for a number of the berms that are in the units now. Next slide, please. So this is a graph of what our approximate acreage is right now for the project. It includes both the upland habitat, open water, and the wetland units, and then what we estimate the acreage to be over time. While the total acreage of the entire wetland unit doesn't change, what you do see is a change in the amount of emergent marsh that increases over time as that land fills in, and a subsequent decrease in some of the upland habitat as it starts to fill in. Next slide, please. So as we just discussed, we received our SERP from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife in July last month, and we have just submitted our draft RMP restoration management permit to the Department of Fish and Wildlife for review. That is also a streamlined permitting process that has been developed as part of the governor's Cutting the Green Tape initiative. So we're excited to be one of the first projects to be able to go through this process with them. And then we expect to have to get permits from these other agencies that are listed here. These agencies are working really closely together as part of this permitting process. So it's really been an interesting and wonderful experience to actually work with all of the agencies together to try to get a permitting process pushed through quickly so that we can get this going. One of the constraints of the project that wasn't up on the board is that we have a grant that expires in 5 years. And so we not only have to design, permit, construct, and start studies within that 5-year period. So we're really, these streamlined processes really allow us to be able to move quickly to be able to get a project like this online, while still ensuring that the state's goals are met and that we do a good job at designing a project that's going to be helpful to the ecosystem and to the region as a whole. Next slide, please. So the next steps for the wetland project, we are completing final design right now. We're working on the 90% design drawings and have comments back from a number of different parts of our organization. We're in the middle of obtaining the regulatory permits, and we're hoping if we can get all of our permits in place to be able to go out for solicitation for a contractor for construction in Q4 of 2025. That might be a little bit of a stretch, and depends upon the permits, how fast we're able to obtain the permits and finishing up the design. And then we would really like to begin construction in the spring of 2026. The next slide, please. So I'd like to really take a moment to thank the Delta Conservancy and the Regulatory Department of Fish and Wildlife. It has the Delta Conservancies, working with them has been wonderful, and they've been such a support to us to be able to work on the projects like this. And the Department of Fish and Wildlife, in their process with the SERP exemption, we've worked really closely with them, and it's really been a pleasure to be able to try to work within this framework that allows these streamlined processes to happen, to get some of these restoration projects through the process. So, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Melinda and Mitsuko. Any questions?
I have a question, quick question. So this is really a great effort, and I'm amazed by the project and how creative you have been. But in terms of the rice field versus the restoration, how do you see the trajectory of that in the future? Is it more or less, and what % is allowable or not in order to maintain the goals of your restoration project?
So the grant actually funded both projects, the rice project, rice conversion, and the wetland project, and it was a minimum of 1,000 acres of rice. The rice is important to the project because it allows us to keep generating revenue on the island, for us to be able to provide long-term habitat management for the wetlands.
Yes.
We've also, although it's not shown on the slide because it wasn't part of the habitat, we're also looking at greenhouse gas emissions and quantifying greenhouse gas emissions to be able to sell those carbon credits to also generate revenue for the island. Long term, eventually, I mean, we're wetting the soil with the rice, so we're stopping subsidence and we're stopping the greenhouse gas emissions. But as we start to build in the wetlands over time, years from now, we're going to have to, it's likely going to end up being in a wetland eventually.
A wetland, yes.
Yeah, eventually. I mean, 50,
sure.
you know.
And then the rice farming activities are working with you. I mean, who are they, like private parties that do that?
We actually just our board awarded a lease last month, or at our August board meeting for a farming partner, Bolden Farming Company, to farm rice on the project or on the island.
I see. And they have always been there before, or this is a new development?
Well, they were part of it. We put it out to bid for rice farmers, and so, yeah, they were the successful bidder for the project. They have actually been on the island and done farming on the island in the past, so they have good experience.
Understanding of what what might happen. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So I will now talk about how the Webb Tract project aligns with the Delta Plan. So slide. Great. Thank you. Through the SERP process, Metropolitan has completed the Good Neighbor checklist that was mentioned before for restoration projects, which is identified in the Delta Plan Recommendation ER-RB. The Good Neighbor Checklist was designed to support local communities by encouraging projects to engage in early conversations and coordination with neighboring interests. They have voluntarily completed the Delta Plan Appendix 3A for policy ERPA, where a project discloses the contributions it makes to restoring ecosystem function and what social benefits it provides, if any. They completed the Delta Plan Appendix 4A for policy ERP2, which is where a project shows that it is protecting, restoring, and enhancing habitats at the appropriate elevations. They prepared a long-term monitoring and management plan that aligns with the adaptive management requirements of GP1B4 and describes management actions that maintain the project and what performance measures, metrics, and monitoring actions are needed to evaluate progress and inform those management actions. They prepared a brief analysis of the Webb Tract project's consistency with the Delta Plan regulatory policies and found that the Webb Tract project is not a covered action. They also obtained letters from the Delta Counties Coalition and 16 other organizations supporting the Webb Tract project and Metropolitan's use of the SERP. Next slide, please. The council's regulations state that a project exempt from CEQA are not covered actions unless there are unusual circumstances. Metropolitan, in concurrence with the Director of Fish and Wildlife, has determined the project qualifies for the SERP. Throughout the consultation with Metropolitan and CDFW, council staff have reviewed the project documentation, including steps taken by Metropolitan to demonstrate how the Webb Tract project aligns with the Delta Plan. Pursuant to the council's regulations, Metropolitan has determined that the Webb Tract Wetland Restoration Project is not a covered action and does not intend to submit a certification of consistency to the council. No council action is needed at this time. And with that, I say thank you, and we'll be happy to answer any more questions.
Thank you. That was excellent. Even though it's not going to be under our purview, it's great to get updates like this and see what's going on. Any members have any other questions about this one? Nope.
Great job.
All right. Emma, do we have any public comment?
We have no public comment in Sacramento, Madam Chair.
Okay.
None in Eureka.
None in San Antonio.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all for being here and presenting that. It's super informative. All right, we are on agenda item 10. This is our Delta Watermaster update. So I'll introduce Jay Ziegler, the Delta Watermaster.
Good morning, Madam Chair, and Stewardship Council members. It's great to be with you today. Could we go to the next slide, please, back, Emma? That's great. I'm going to move fairly quickly today, just to kind of leave time. I think we're at an incredibly dynamic moment in thinking about the future of the Delta. And so I want to make sure that I leave time for questions today, because I think this fall is going to be very busy for all of us. So thank you. I think on the positive side, we are moving to implementation of the new Cal Water's integrated data reporting platform at the state board. That platform is now open on kind of a demo or beta basis, and will close down and then reopen again on October 1 for water filing for water year 25. And we're also wanting to touch on ongoing work in our office with the greater Delta science community with respect to strategies to really better define and map in real time the alignment of diversions and flow accounting methodologies in the Delta. I want to talk about some real-time issues in the South Delta, especially with respect to the urgency for better channel maintenance programs and sediment management that are impacting the ability to get water to water rights holders in the South Delta. And additionally, I want to kind of review the board schedule with respect to the Water Quality Control Plan update before the board and specifically workshops and comment deadlines. Next slide, please. As I touched on this, we have reviewed consistently with you the in-Delta-led reporting initiative in an alternative compliance program using OpenET data to really better align an understanding of where and how much Delta diverters are using, both from an agricultural perspective as well as direct diverters throughout the Delta, and integrating that information. Consistent with water reporting in water year 23, as we close out water year 24 reporting, we reached a 98% compliance level in the legal delta. And that compares on a statewide level to a roughly 70% compliance level in terms of water filing, water data reporting overall. And so I think it's important to kind of look at the Delta as really having a great buy-in in this alternative reporting platform. It's really giving us a great baseline understanding of the Delta water budget and where, again, and when water is being diverted from the Delta system. Next slide, please. I want to just also kind of note, as we think about the transition to the Cal Water system, we've had the benefit of having extraordinary buy-in and support from, especially from Central and South Delta water agencies, in developing the alternative compliance OpenET-based filing methodology in the Delta. And as we now move to one data system that is incorporative of OpenET as well as direct diversion in the CalWater's platform this year, it can seem overwhelming to think that we need to reach 2,800 water rights holders with a new system. I think as you break that out, what we're seeing is increasingly, especially in the Delta, there are 125 agents that represent the overwhelming share of Delta reporters. And so as we think about transitioning to the board's new water reporting database, I think our office is particularly focused in working with the Delta water agencies to conduct a series of workshops this fall to bring all reporters along. And as you kind of unpack that, it's, you know, if we can bring 125 sophisticated water experts, engineers and attorneys together to understand the new methodologies and align as much as we've been able to with the existing alternative compliance reporting platform in the Delta, I think we can really get to a very high level of compliance. I don't think in year one we'll hit our 98% reporting threshold again, but we feel very optimistic in our communications with some of the beta users that we'll be able to bring the Delta community along at really these extraordinary reporting levels to better understand diversion and flow dynamics and the relationship there in the Delta. Next slide, please. And the reason this is important is we think we're all celebrating this moderate summer that we've had, and it's, you know, it's been good for farmers, it's been good for recreation, it's been good for those on the public health side worried about harmful algal blooms. But when we see spikes in water diversions in the Delta, those coincide with high heat periods, especially if we have periods of extreme heat above 100 degrees for multiple days. You see diversion spikes, and that's where we really, especially in low flow years, need to better understand the relationship between diversions, water quality, and water availability, especially in the South Delta. And so I just want to let you know that we're really focused on better information to understand real-time dynamics with respect to water diversion in the Delta. Next slide, please. And to that end, my predecessor, Michael George, launched an invaluable program with the greater science community, statewide, even beyond California's borders, in Delta water diverters, legal experts in water rights, the academic community, and farmers on the ground to better define methodologies to really narrow the what we don't know about the relationship between diversions and inflow, water quality, and other flow indicators throughout the Delta. So we are continuing to work not to just say this open ET indexing of water use is great, but consistent with the newly adopted SB 88 regs that the state board approved on August 5th. We are also looking at what methodology works best for the major diverters across the Delta and beyond an open ET indexing. And there, for all major diverters, there's a daily reporting requirement. We expect that methodology to be different in different places in the Delta for different applications and uses, reflecting the best technologies that we can use to better understand real-time data diversion and its effects on water quality and other objectives, and especially habitat as we look forward. And is that habitat achieving water temperatures, water quality, and suitable aquatic habitat conditions to enhance population goals tied to restoration projects. Next slide, please. I want to kind of dig in a bit to a real-time issue in the South Delta. And as we speak, the Pescadero Irrigation District in the South Delta is not able to get the water it needs to meet its water orders from agricultural diverters in Pescadero Irrigation District, which is roughly framed in the west by the Clifton Court Forebay and the boundaries of Old and Middle River circulating around the district in the South Delta. So the particular challenge there is that the western opening at Tom Payne Slough is really the critical arterial for meeting the district's water needs. And at one point, a few weeks ago, they were only able to get about 40% of the water that they needed to meet agricultural irrigation needs. That has varied since then in the range of 50 to about 75%. And so it's an ongoing problem, and we can anticipate that in the absence of a coordinated dredging program, these water accessibility issues will remain front and center, especially as the projects ramp up pumping in July and August. Next slide, please. So this is a little bit more specific information on the exact water availability challenges along Tom Payne Slough, and you can see here that it is kind of fed by on the western side at Sugar Cut and where the tide gates are noted in the center bottom circle area there. Next slide, please. So to kind of just nail this down a bit from your perspective and what we really need to be watching across the Delta, but especially in the South Delta, is that in these periods where the state and federal projects are ramping up pumping in the late summer, what we see in the data is that there is a consistent relationship in the tidal level response and the intersection of peak diversions in Delta, as well as the ramp up of state and federal project operations, which you saw earlier today are now above 11,000 CFS. And additionally, we're seeing some anomalies in observed water levels in the South Delta as alongside the modeled level response. And so I think we need to have an open discussion with the Bureau and DWR with respect to truing up our modeling in a really open and transparent way to better understand actual conditions in the Delta and how we are moving forward in that. And I will applaud the work of DWR in really moving forward and closing out the monitoring and special studies program, which should inform future operations of the COP and thinking about how we integrate both in Delta needs, water quality objectives, and project operations more coherently together. But I think this is just really a snapshot in this moment of some of the stresses that we face in the Delta, and the reality that it's pretty clear that emergent sandbars in the South Delta, left unattended, will make this a bigger problem each year looking forward. And so the water availability issue is absolutely critical. Next slide, please. I want to kind of turn to the Western Delta briefly with respect to Delta Plan and objectives with respect to administration of water rights in the Delta. There are a couple of interesting projects that we're watching closely, and I think you're aware, we have discussed previously the annexation of the proposed California Forever project into Suisun City. What that means, we still have significant concerns about the availability of water to meet the needs of first a population of 40,000, but ultimately 400,000. And where that water comes from, given the rather real paucity of rights that are assigned to the lands that were acquired and incorporated in the California Forever project. And so I think that's just something that we have to watch closely together in ensuring that that the water needs of this proposed new city are met in context of thinking about the wider Delta water budget. Next slide, please. Similarly, there's an interesting exploratory project that's been initiated in the South Delta, or really the Western Delta, Southwestern Delta, in looking at a model for sustainability, increasing, as the prior project noted, increasing the reducing level of subsidence at first and increasing soil accretion through sustainable land practices on Jersey Island. And in particular here, I think we need to make sure that this climate resilience model for land management is also in sync with realistic exercise of existing water rights and what that means. And so I think we're just, again, watching closely the alignment of constructive experimental land use objectives, as well as ensuring that we're paying attention to the water budget implications in the legal delta. Next slide, please. In this context, I think we're all going to be digging in quite a bit and looking at the water quality control plan update and what in particular the Healthy Rivers and Landscapes program brings forward, and potentially what could we do in addition to the portfolio of projects identified in the voluntary agreement, again, the Healthy Rivers and Landscapes, as well as the regulatory framework and unimpaired flow, and what issues should we be looking at in different areas of the Delta? I think increasingly habitat and land use and local revenue and predictability of land use patterns in the bypass remains a big concern in Yolo and Solano counties. The Cache Slough complex is an area of concern. We have a series of projects, including Lookout Slough, that have been completed, and a number of projects in the queue to enhance intertidal habitat restoration. But as we look at habitat conditions in Cache Slough today, we have seen lethal dissolved oxygen levels for fisheries running now for a couple of weeks in the summer. And as we get later into the summer, that forecast remains a real concern, because if we have salmonids in the system and we have lethal conditions for those fish that we're trying to propagate and enhance in terms of population response, we've got to look at how are we monitoring these places in the system to make sure that we have aligned values in the objectives for the habitat restoration and how that habitat is performing. Lower Mokelumne is a really interesting place. There's a lot of interest in thinking about water banking enhancement projects and floodplain restoration. Suisun Marsh is an area where we have really active models for intertidal habitat and what that could mean, and how we would structure a transition from some of the freshwater habitat to intertidal marsh. And then in the South Delta, candidly, our major concern is water availability and water quality, and managing the intersection of those issues. Next slide, please. So looking ahead, the state board has scheduled a workshop on the Healthy Rivers and Landscapes and Water Quality Control Plan update. Those dates actually changed since last Friday when we developed the deck. The workshop is a 2-day workshop with the board on September 24th and 25th, not the 25th and 26th. The comment deadline is September 29th for all public comments on the draft that was released in late July. And the board is projected to act in integrating all of those comments that will be received on the 25 version of the plan before the end of the year. That may be an optimistic schedule given other considerations, but that's kind of tentatively the objective as we move forward today. Next slide, please. Finally, this dynamism in the Delta is really, I think, coming to a head. There are a number of issues, I think, that both the Stewardship Council and especially the Delta Science Program, Independent Science Board, the State Board, and the Office of the Delta Watermaster need to be monitoring closely. Let me, at the top of that list, the Bureau is currently entertaining proposals to contract out its share of in-Delta water monitoring at the 55-gauge station network across the Delta. This is of concern for a number of reasons. The U.S. Geological Survey has been administering this program, which has been a 50-50 partnership between the USBR and the Department of Water Resources. So you have an integration component that the USGS has performed in bringing data together, providing a quality assurance analysis of the data, the complementary aspects of ensuring that there is data consistency, and providing a real public access and data availability. And we are quite concerned about a process that suddenly moves to contract out half of that program. What are the implications of that for the Department of Water Resources with respect to increased obligations conferred to the department if the Bureau's program is not adequate to meet the data standards of the state board? And so I think this raises a lot of questions, whether your concern is fundamentally about water quality, fisheries restoration, or water deliveries for the projects, because fundamentally the system depends on reliable integrated data from which we can all make informed decisions. And so if that data set is somehow threatened, interrupted, inconsistent, that provides a really worrisome picture with respect to how does the board administer the update of a water quality control plan, let alone existing requirements in D1641 and endangered species flows. So I just want to flag this for you as a really critical concern that I think has to be kind of at the top of our list, and looking closely at what emerges from the board's process, or rather the Bureau's process in awarding a contract for effectively half of the 55-gauge station network in the Delta, and what its implications are to understand and align water management with objectives in a water quality control plan and with respect to the endangered species flows. We've also seen cuts at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in weather monitoring programs, climate effects, and similarly at National Marine Fisheries Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service with respect to specific fisheries monitoring programs, and finally, the Department of Interior has also already undertaken significant cuts to biological and environmental research, and we're all aware that the Bureau has also absorbed a 20% personnel cut, and with potentially deeper cuts on the horizon. And so all of this, as we're considering a water quality control plan update, especially in the Healthy Rivers and Landscapes program, which suggests that we need a better level of monitoring to ensure public confidence in really understanding whether objectives in a future plan are being met, even as we speak, whether existing standards in D1641 and associated endangered species flow requirements are being met. So I think those are issues that really go to the integrity, accessibility, and application of science-based decision-making in the Delta that are fundamentally at risk. And even as we're thinking about new approaches to achieve better outcomes associated with a water quality control plan update. So thanks for the opportunity to be with you today. I just felt it was important to kind of end on a sobering note of the vulnerability of aligning science with good decision-making in the Delta. And I do appreciate the work that Delta Science Program is doing, that the Independent Science Board put forth in its evaluation of the Healthy Rivers and Streams, Healthy Rivers and Landscapes Program. And I've appreciated the partnership in working with Dr. Lisa Marie Wyndham-Myers in thinking about methodologies and building out additional capacity in the science program to be an effective third party, if you will, and to really meet the statutory obligation that was set forth for the Stewardship Council in having a science program that is at the center of all meaningful management decisions in the Delta. So with that, thank you, and let me entertain your questions.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that was very sobering, and we have been watching it, and it's not great. Anybody have any questions? Yes, Maria.
Two quick questions. One, that you talked about the berm that is being unattended or unmaintained and that impacts. If you could just explain that a little bit. And then if you can tell us one more time, the South and North, South Delta and North Delta, you mentioned what's important and what the challenges are in each.
Yeah.
I missed that. Yeah.
Sure. So let me start with the Pescadero challenges. So if we could go back to that slide, it's probably most helpful looking at the map. I think it's about 5 slides back. Whoops, one forward, forward, back, forward. I'll just see here. There we go. Okay, great. Let's go back there. So if you look at where you see Dowdy Cut, it's also sometimes referred to as the 5 corners areas, and then down to Sugar Cut, which is vertically assigned on the map, and Tom Paine Slough. Roughly at the yellow arrow there, we've identified approximately a 200-foot sandbar, and the water elevations at that sandbar at high tide are about 2.3 feet. On each side of that sandbar, the channel depths return to a roughly normal, quote unquote, perspective, and thinking about delta circulation and how it's modeled, of 6 to 9 feet depth. And so you have this significant sandbar that effectively creates a null zone. It absorbs tidal energy, and so you don't have the same circulation of flow across Sugar Cut. And so what's happening is that the sandbars are affecting hydrodynamics in that part of the delta in a way that significantly restricts available water supply at the western entry to Tom Paine Slough. And so that's the kind of issue that we're seeing around the delta that is commonly and causally directly relating to water availability problems in thinking about circulation in the South Delta. So, and then going back to the habitat slide, what I meant to provide a picture of here is that the issues as we think about the Delta, it's as the council understands probably as closely as the water board, there are different values that we're really managing to achieve in different areas of the Delta. And in particular, Cache Slough Complex, the Northern Delta region, Yolo Bypass, provide opportunities for habitat restoration consistent with their lower, with a kind of a lower restoration barrier to achieve additional inflow, additional cross flow for intertidal habitat. And so we have to, I think, watch the functionality of those goals. I think one of the concerns that starting to emerge is, have we effectively modeled all of these prospective habitat restoration projects in the Cache Slough complex in a way that accounts for tidal energy dispersion, so you don't have as much tidal energy pushing up in as far north in the Delta if you are inundating thousands of acres of floodplain. And so I think what we have to really closely align, and I think this is especially important for public and regional understanding in the Delta, is that when we talk about achieving restoration targets of 60,000 restored acres in the Delta, that's not a uniform apportionment of habitat across the Delta. It's very focused in certain areas of the Delta, in the bypass, Cache Slough complex, Lower Casumnas, some in the South Delta. And so I think it becomes incumbent on really communicating more clearly about what the values are that we're trying to achieve in each one of those places, and to ensure that our monitoring programs are aligned with those objectives. And so that's really what I'm hopeful that we can really work with the science program and the board to achieve in the context of a water quality control plan update.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. It's on slide 11, page 11, about the Jersey Island proposed acquisition by Diablo. Is that going to be similar to Metropolitan's purchase of Webb that we kind of had our presentation on here today? Is that the hope that it's going to do something like that?
Yeah, I might. Is Campbell Ingram still here? He just stepped up. Dude. All right. So the Conservancy, the general answer there is yes. And the Conservancy's been working very actively with Diablo Water Agency to really kind of align these objectives for agricultural and habitat management at the island that provides an example consistent with what Metropolitan is trying to do in enhancing resilience for both agriculture and long-term viability in light of sea level rise and flood vulnerability there. And so I think it's a really hopeful example kind of down that track. I think what we're also concerned about is to make sure that that full range of activities is aligned with the exercise of water rights there. So we're having a pretty active dialogue with the Conservancy and other parties to make sure that that's happening.
Got it. Excellent. Do any other members have questions? All right, seeing none. Do we have any public comment, Emma?
None in Sacramento, Madam Chair.
None in Eureka. Thanks again, Jay.
And none in San Antonio.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you, Jay.
All right, thank you.
Right. Our next presentation, agenda item 11, is Department of Water Resources Delta Conveyance Project Update. And we have with us Carrie Buckman. Hi, Carrie.
Hello.
Thank you for having me for an update on the Delta Conveyance Project, my regular quarterly update. So I think we can go to the next slide. I'm going to talk today about our new accountability action plan and then also hit on some general permitting updates. Next slide, please. So we released the accountability action plan, I think it was last week, although it might have been the week before. And the idea here is that we wanted to document the programs that we have that together provide some accountability, our accountability to the community, that we are transparent about what we are doing, trying to facilitate awareness of the available programs, and identifying the distinct parallel commitments from the EIR, and memorializing details on implementation and tracking so that we can demonstrate that we are meeting our commitments. And this is not anything that is new or different from what was in the EIR. These are the same commitments that we've been making, but this packaged them together and provided more details on a lot of those commitments. Next slide, please. The first is the Ombudsman Office. And this was something that came from an interested party suggestion that trying to address construction concerns during construction can be really challenging for local members of the public. So we wanted sort of a one-stop shop where people could go with questions or concerns, and that point of contact will be able to help with construction-related concerns or grievances, or be a resource to provide information. And sometimes that might be, someone expresses a concern and the ombudsman knows that that concern isn't a Delta Conveyance project and can sort of help point them in the right direction. Sometimes it is a construction concern and they will have a direct connection to authorities to quickly investigate and resolve issues. Next slide, please. We also have quite a bit of regulatory mitigation. So the mitigation is included in a number of permits to avoid, minimize, or offset potential environmental impacts in the project area. And it does include coordination with local and regulatory agencies, and it covers resources like noise, traffic, aesthetics, air quality, habitat restoration, and many others. And one of the reasons we wanted to have something about this in the accountability action plan is that it can be kind of overwhelming. The monitoring, mitigation, and reporting plan in our CEQA documentation is almost 200 pages, and we know that it's unlikely that many members of the public will really have interest in wading through that to understand the commitments. So we've been trying to have an explainer that makes it more easy to understand and see where they can watch for those kinds of commitments and activities and see that they're being done. Next slide, please. We've talked a number of times about the Community Benefits Program. This most recent release does include the final implementation plan and guidelines, and that includes revisions based on community input that we talked about, I think at the last time I was here, but it might have been 2 meetings ago. So the program is fundamentally the same as what we talked about in the past. So it includes the community fund, where we are going to be giving grants to community prioritized projects, economic development like hiring targets, job training, local business utilization, the potential for integrated benefits, and then community benefits agreements. And if we go, and one more note here, there is the commitment that was included in the cost estimate last year and continues to be discussed and memorialized, that this program would be $200 million. I think we say sometimes about $200 million because it will be escalated to the start of construction, but in 2023 dollars, it's $200 million. Next slide, please. So I wanted to dive in a little bit to the community benefits agreements. So we have been working with a number of parties to develop agreements in principle. And the idea here is that we work more closely with public agencies, tribal governments, or nonprofit organizations. And having an agreement allows us to engage more with the parties rather than having a grant program where the parties really have to finish and develop the program entirely on their own. So this includes things like recreation and tourism, historic and cultural preservation, environmental education, agricultural support, or community improvements within the eligible boundary. And it helps with the ability to comply with applicable local, state, and federal laws and regulations. So it cannot include any obligation by the state to complete required mitigation or as a result of an enforcement action. In other words, we can't give the money to DWR to meet our own mitigation requirements. And also, we're pretty clear, and I think we have been the whole time, that eligible entities do not have to support the Delta Conveyance project that is included in the agreements in principle, But we do say that the funded project must not conflict with the Delta Conveyance project, like it can't be on the same parcel of land that we're planning a facility. And I did want to pause before we move on this and just give an example of this. So at the last meeting, Councilmember Burgess had asked me about Dutch Slough, and I'm sorry she's not here today, but I still wanted to just give a little bit of an example because I think it illustrates an important point. This is an agreement that is under consideration. We haven't made it yet, but it is on a DWR-owned parcel. And so it brought up the question of whether this was funding a commitment that is from DWR that we've already made. And so we did quite a bit of research on this to determine that it does not. So Dutch Slough is a project that was completed by DWR in concert with other agencies. It was not a mitigation project. It was through the Delta Levee System Integrity and Delta Habitat Restoration Program as part of the State Ecosystem Restoration Program. And DWR partnered with local agencies. It was always envisioned that it would include a recreation component if a local entity, a qualified local entity, was identified to provide that recreational opportunity. That funding and opportunity did not come forward. So the restoration component is complete, but the recreation add-on was never completed, and that was not a DWR commitment. That was a local commitment. So as a result, we do think that we can provide that agreement for the recreation piece, and it is not sort of double counting something that DWR was already committed to. Next slide, please. So a little bit about timing, and also a note about the map on the side of this slide. One of the pieces of feedback that we received from the guideline review is that it was a little unclear about the area that was covered. So we did include a map in the final version so that it was a little easier to follow. And there are some good reasons for confusion. For example, we had been thinking that all of Stockton was included because part of Stockton is in the legal delta, but in fact, all of Stockton is not in the legal delta. So we wanted to make sure that it was specified that all of Stockton would be eligible. So this map is all of the legal delta, both primary and secondary zones, all of Stockton, and then a bump out at Twin Cities and Bethany Reservoir to make sure that the areas around the proposed facilities are covered.
Although the legal delta in the Reform Act includes Sassoon, and this doesn't appear to include Sassoon.
It does not include Sassoon. Thank you for the clarification. So a little bit about timing. We are working now to try to develop initial agreements in principle with the parties that are interested in community benefits agreements. Those agreements are clear that we cannot engage in a final agreement or funding until we have implementation ready to go, but we do have an agreement in principle. So we are planning to complete major permits and approvals at the end of 26. And then in 27 and 28, there will be votes from the public water agencies on implementing the project. And then DWR, as part of the State Water Project, would issue revenue bonds to fund the Delta Conveyance project based on those implementation votes. So we cannot fully execute community benefits agreements until those steps are complete, that we have the implementation votes and revenue bonds in order to fund those agreements. So after we issue revenue bonds, then we would fully execute the community benefits agreements from those agreements in principle. Next slide, please. So another commitment in the Accountability Action Plan is community advisory groups. The idea here is that as the design moves forward, there will be a lot of design decisions made that will be things that we could get input from the local community that might make the facilities less concerning for them. So we want to really try to pull together community members to help with things like aesthetic choices, landscaping, layout and configuration of the project sites, traffic, site access during construction and operations, timing and duration of maintenance activities, and potential multi-use haul routes. So those are some examples. There could be other things, but it really is very focused on the design process as we move forward from implementation towards construction. Next slide, please. And then last, we just want to always note that we are committed to continuing project communications where we keep local agencies informed in a manner that is transparent, accessible, and proactive. Next slide, please. Okay, so that's the Accountability Action Plan. So moving into just some quick permitting updates. our California Endangered Species Act permit, we did receive an incidental take permit in February. The federal side, the biological opinions on construction are expected in late 2025. For water rights, we are in the middle of our change in point of diversion hearing. So we are currently going through the protestants' case in chief, and those hearing dates are set through mid-October, but there are some currently proposed dates through late October. So I do anticipate it will continue through late October. We are planning to submit our certification of consistency this fall, so it's coming right up. And in the meantime, we have paused all geotechnical activities while the court appeal is pending. Next slide, please. So just a few notes about the certification of consistency. It will cover the entire Delta Conveyance project. So this is a much bigger endeavor than the last time we were here. And as recommended in the administrative procedures, we will publicly post the draft certification of consistency for 10 days before we submit. And we will publish an administrative record concurrently with filing the certification. So I think we can move on, and I think that is my last slide. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Great, thank you. Any questions from any of our members for Carrie? No, that was great. Very informative. Thank you. How is the engagement with the communities going on the community benefit program? Just in general, would you say that you guys are getting some interest, or it's still kind of like they're waiting to see if it's really going to happen?
I think both. I think we are definitely getting interest. I think we really are working hard to make sure that parties understand that there really is no implied or indirect support of the project if they participate. Many of them are opposing the project, but also in case it goes forward, it's sort of belt and suspenders. And we understand that, and that is fine. So I think that that is a big piece of moving through this process to make sure that that's clear.
Got it. Okay, thank you. And do we have any public comment on this item, Emma?
Yes, Madam Chair, we have a public comment from Art Darden. You may come up now.
Thank you for having me this morning, and I've learned a lot sitting here today. And I will first say retirement can get you in a lot of trouble. Yes. So I live in Rio Vista, edge of the Delta, love the Delta. I'm a lifelong Californian, and I have a picture of myself fishing on the river across from Rio Vista when I was 5 years old, sitting in my office. So been here my whole life. Anyway, the concern I have is looking at climate change and how it's impacting big picture, what's going to happen in the United States because Colorado River is dying. Fresh water is becoming California's gold right now. It is the most important thing we have. Agriculture, in the future, California agriculture has the opportunity to provide much more food for the nation, because between climate change and really poor decisions by some government agencies and people, we have this opportunity, but we need to take advantage of it with our fresh water. And so my concern is, how do we protect our fresh water and get it where it's needed, whether it's in urban Southern California or it's the Central Valley agriculture? How do we move that water around and still protect the place that I love most, which is the Delta? And I have a couple questions. How are we stopping the marine water intrusion into the Delta? If we take more water before it hits the Delta and redirect it around, then how do we prevent marine water from entering the Delta and raising the salinity of the Delta? Raising the salinity of the Delta is not only going to be have a negative impact on our fish population and on our recreation, but it's going to impact the vegetation that holds our levees together. And our levees will make our levees much more in much more of a hazard condition. And just as how much water do we need to pass through fresh water to pass through the Carquinez Straits to for our migrating fish population? I'm a big fisherman. I love salmon. I love steelhead trout. So how do we allow for that to continue to happen? And we need to focus on that. We need to focus on fresh water and how do we use and reuse our fresh water. Pacific Ocean does not need our fresh water. How do we minimize the use that goes out to the Pacific and still maintain our healthy environment here? I've said this in other places. It's time today is we can't stop saying, no, we can't do this, or no, we shouldn't do this, or no. We can't continue to say no to everything. We need to come up with realistic solutions, go on offense to make these things happen. I am personally against the Delta Conveyance project for the reason that I said, that if we take water before it even gets into the Delta, how is that going to help our Delta? So I'll leave you with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. Emma, do we have any other comments?
No further comments online or in Sacramento.
Okay.
None in Eureka.
None in San Antonio.
All right. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you.
So that brings us to our last agenda item, which is the preparation for the next council meeting, which will take place on Friday, September 26th at the CNRA building. So please refer to the posted meeting notice for further information. And I just want to emphasize that this is a change from our normal Thursday meetings. So pay attention to this important sign that I made that says Friday. Is that good, Emma? Okay. All right. Remember that next month, Friday. Thank you. We're adjourned.